What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? How are we doing? I thought I'd do a little mailbag. Ease on into the weekend. Call it a little weekend mailbag. Not much going on. Take a deep breath before for another week until we get to the grind of football on a daily basis. Watching a little British Open today looks cool. I mean, listen. I have a lot of respect for those across the pond. If it was that cold and windy and wet all the time, I would never play golf. We will do a mailbag, though. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Fire in those DMs. Get your questions answered here on the show. We will start with Miles, Texans fan. I'm curious how we should go about handling the upcoming salary cap situation with CJ and Will Anderson. They were both will be due for extensions, as we know, and both are top 5 picks in the same draft class. I can't remember a team ever having a situation like this. Do you try and extend one of them a year early if they would be willing, even though I'd imagine they both want to wait because the market gets reset seemingly every offseason? Or realistically, are we going to have to break the bank for these two? Well, I think there are a lot of different variables here. In relation to your question, they play premium positions. So if Will Anderson, who I think is going to be one of the better players at his position for obviously health permitting the next 8 to 10 years. I mean, that's a long time, but definitely the next 5-6 years. So he's a no doubt about it. CJ, big year for him, right? Coming off incredible rookie season, weird offensive season. Offensive line was bad. Let's face it, they pointed the finger at Bobby Slowick, who, as I was talking to a buddy in the NFL, basically tried a copy and paste version of Shanahan, which he knows the offense. In the first year, it worked pretty well, but as time went on, people adjusted. He got really exposed. And I think the Texans think they upgraded an offensive coordinator. They can be a more balanced operation. The offensive line is a question mark, but Nico's a stud. They draft the wide receiver really high from Iowa State. The running game, we'll see. I mean, a huge part of a quarterback. It helps the quarterback a lot. I mean, it just does. They bring in Nick Chubb. Does he have anything left? But I would expect a bounce back year from CJ. But bottom line is, if you get a top front guy, defensive tackle, edge rusher, outside linebacker, pass rusher, he's a double-digit sack guy. That's the most important guy you can get on defense. And they already have a star corner. And obviously the most important guy you could have on offense is the quarterback. But I think what we need to learn about CJ, do you feel comfortable? If he has a bounce back year and 2 of his 3 years have been exceptional, it's okay, he's a top 6-7 quarterback in the NFL. But if he has a year again like last year, you're well, then it's I think you pump the brakes, right? If Will Anderson keeps doing what he's doing, he's an auto try to extend after year 3. To me, CJ, not saying he's going anywhere, but this is a big year for him, the offense, the offensive coordinator. D'Amico made a big move, firing Slowick, who was his buddy. Not that he deserved to keep his job, but I'm sure it wasn't easy. I think the Texans are going to be good. I mean, they're going to have one of the best defenses in the league. I mean, honestly, they have an opportunity to be right there with teams like the Ravens, teams like the Broncos. I mean, their defense is going to be awesome. So offensively, if they answer the bell, I was looking on DraftKings, you can get them plus 110 to win the division. I would be stunned. Now, obviously, football injuries can happen, but just based on what we've seen in the last couple of years, they're not going to win the division. It's pretty crazy that their odds aren't minus 150. Kind of love it. Now, last year I got a little bullish on them. I bet them to get the number 1 seed. I wouldn't go that far. And listen, I don't think they can win the AFC, but I think they can be pretty good. Was listening to you talk about Nick Saban, and I had a random question. Which football coach could you see being a great U.S. president? What traits and qualities would translate well into that role? Bill is the GOAT, but would that mean he could also be the GOAT president? I would say Saban and Belichick would have absolutely zero chance to be good presidents. I mean, I think being a good politician, those days are fucking dead. I mean, look at some of these people all over the country that are in office. I mean, it's a joke. Now, maybe it's always been a joke. Maybe the older you get, if I was 40 years old in 1978 or 1995, I would have said the same thing. And maybe it's just different because of social media. But listen, I'm from a world where we respect the private sector. The government is kind of a laughingstock where I come from. So I just think these guys would never be used to playing politics. Like Bill didn't play politics in New England for 25 years. There were no politics for Nick Saban. He did what he wanted to do. He was a fucking dictator. That's how most college. That's how Kirby is now. That's how Coach K was. That's how John Calipari is. I mean, that's how all these basketball and football coaches are. I do think if you throw back to the '90s, when the Bobby Bowden type guy, Steve Spurrier, I think their personalities were a little more quote unquote political back in the day. Not that they didn't have a lot of juice, but one, politics doesn't pay. I mean, so many of these politicians, that's like their job. They go in poor and come out rich. Doesn't quite make sense, but I don't know. I think politics is a fucking joke. Hey, John, another question. I mean, obviously it's not, it impacts our lives, but these people that get up in arms, it's like, I don't respect these people. I mean, I just don't. And that's why I honestly, I think in the football community, the respect for most politicians is pretty low. It's really low. And I would say that in most industries. Now, you need them sometimes. Obviously, you got to do what you do. But, in football, for political stuff, the league office handles a lot of that. And sometimes your team president, if you're trying to get a stadium, the coaches, they don't deal with any of that bullshit. We talk about GMs and owners in the NFL. How to your knowledge, does the league look at Mickey Loomis and Gayle Benson? Are they good and well-respected, or are they a clown show? What's up? Love the pod. New Orleans native, born and raised. I feel like a lot of broadcasters forget about the length of time the Saints dominated, and now we are consistently shit on. I get it, trust me. Since Drew and Sean have left, but why is Tyler Shuck and Kellen Moore getting swept under the rug? Kellen Moore just won the Super Bowl. Greg Cosell and a lot of other NFL films analysts said he's really good. Shuck had the second best film coming out of the draft. I know the quarterback sucked. Class sucked compared to last year. Also, I hear what you're saying. I think, it's funny. Like, was the Patriots a well-run organization, or did Bill and Tom know what they were doing? Right? Now, obviously they got Vrabel now. Maybe they can run. But if you just gave Robert Kraft some random coach, he's probably going to suck. Like, the owners, a lot of times, have nothing to do with it. I mean, they do. And once they get the right guy, they support him. But if you gave Jeffrey Lurie the wrong coach, he will lose, right? If you give Robert Kraft the wrong coach, he will lose. I've seen Jed York look smart with Jim Harbaugh and Kyle Shanahan and look like an idiot with Jim Tom Sula and Mike Singletary. So I don't care who you are as an owner. Stan Kroenke, like, the Rams are well run. Why? Sean McVay's their coach. If they had hired Joe Judge, right, everyone thought the Giants were one of the model organizations for about a decade with Tom Coughlin and Eli Manning. Look what they've been for the last 7, 8, 9 years. So I think it's very, very coach dependent. And when you had Sean Payton, he's really good. Look, he goes to the Broncos, they're immediately good. So, does Mickey Loomis know what he's doing? Yeah. I mean, he had a front row seat working hand in hand with Sean. But, if you give him Dennis Allen, he's going to suck. Is Kellen Moore a good head coach? I don't know. I don't know. To me, the Tyler Shuck thing, history would say that guys like him are not going to be good players. I mean, he played in college for 7 years. I'm sorry, call me old school, archaic way of thinking, but he was in the same recruiting class as Brock Purdy. God, I'm fired up. The British Open is here. The biggest names in golf teeing it up across the pond to chase history, the game's original major. Want to make some cash while watching people play golf? You can by betting on the action at Royal Portrush with DraftKings Sportsbook. From the opening round through Championship Sunday, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with live betting, player props, and so much more. If you've never bet on golf before, it's easier than you think. Just pick something simple like a golfer to win the tournament. Rory McIlroy. Can he win his second major of the year? This is where he grew up. Last time it did not go well. He missed the cut. I do think Rory's going to be a major factor. John Rahm playing really well. Scotty Scheffler, can he finally break through? You can also bet top 10s, top 20s, parlay them together. Does not get any easier. Here's something special for first-timers. New DraftKings customers. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Love the show. Should the Rams and the Rams fans be worried that their starting left tackle they just paid now has blood clots, and the right tackle got a complete shoulder clean out and was not active during minicamp? Last year we started out without our starting tackles and went 1-3. You know what's funny is I think I'm going to do some like division previews over the next couple weeks. And I think if you just ask most people, the Rams get a lot of credit, and rightfully so, for how good they looked against the Eagles, right? They were right there. They could have easily beat the team that dominated Washington, dominated the Chiefs. They were playing really well at the last point of the season. And even the previous year, they easily could have beat the Lions. I think, did they play the Lions? Is that who they played? No, I forget. Did they play the Lions? Yeah, they did in the first round, right? Maybe I'm getting that wrong. But whoever they played, I'm pretty sure they did 2 years ago. They've won 20 games the last 2 years, 10-10. I think that sometimes when we talk about them in the offseason, like they're the Lions or the Eagles, like they've been rattling off 13, 14, 15 wins. They're not the betting favorite to win the division. So I think the Rams, very top heavy, they're very dependent on like 4 or 5 guys. Now, granted, those guys, when Stafford's playing, when Puka's playing, when Verse and Fisk are playing, they're going to be good. But they are not, to me, some like Eagles when the Lions are healthy, the Ravens. Like their roster is not quite that. They do have a lot of young ascending talent, but they are a couple injuries away, like you said, from being in. They've started really slow the last couple years. Their talent, they get by a lot with tough. They're tough on defense now. The young guys in the front is good. Their coaching with Sean is elite. And Stafford on individual games can go toe-to-toe with anybody. But now they add Devontae. Offensively, they should be better or just more dynamic. But Cooper Kupp was actually sneaky more productive than you realized last year. So I don't care who you are. If your tackles, and listen, it's July 17th, so we'll see what happens over the next. They don't play a game for almost 2 months. If I take anyone starting 2 tackles away, I'm again, I don't know if these guys both might be ready to play, but in a game, you could be playing a team that wins 3 or 4 games, let alone a playoff team. You can easily lose that game. So offensive line depth, the amount of good offensive line that have come into the league over the last decade is diminished relative to what it used to be. So most teams, and I wouldn't say the Rams, have some like superior offensive line. Though Ryan Wendell, Fresno State guy, their offensive line coach, I was just DMing with his wife Meredith, who when I was at Fresno worked with us in recruiting. She lives in LA because I was texting her. She DM'd me congrats on the baby, and she laughed at the picture I reposted of McVay. I'm like, how does he look so good? Is he on Botox? She's like, he works out and he eats really healthy, but he looks the same. Like his picture year 1, year 9. But Ryan Wendell, who was taught by Pat Hill in college, went on to play in the NFL as an undrafted free agent and started in the Super Bowl for the Patriots, and he learned from Dante Scarnecchia, is a really good offensive line coach. I mean, really good. He's a guy that probably more people should talk about, I think, internally. I mean, Sean knows how good he has it. Ryan's a really, really smart, tough guy. I mean, ask Tom. I know you can't ask Tom Brady, neither can I don't know the guy. But if you did ask Tom Brady or Belichick about Ryan Wendell, the way they would speak about him would be really, really highly. So I think that's offensive line coaching is pretty important. Like, I've seen it forever with the 49ers. I'm like, beside Trent Williams, who are some of these guys? How are you competing at the highest level with this group? It's like, I think Kyle would tell you, Chris Forrester is pretty elite at his job. And our scheme, it's no different than McVay. Like our scheme. Now, the difference is Kyle avoids the pass as much as possible. McVay's like kind of like a 40-year-old in shape Andy Reid. If McVay had to pick a game plan, 10 like a the NFC Championship 5 years ago when Jimmy Garoppolo threw it 8 times or 10 times, like Harbaugh 2 years ago with JJ McCarthy against Penn State. I guess Harbaugh was suspended, but they didn't throw it in the second half. And JJ, I forget the exact, like 8 attempts, 5 attempts, 10 attempts, whatever it was. Harbaugh, Kyle Shanahan, Mike Shanahan, those guys live. Like, if they could win a game with throwing like less than 5 passes and just run the ball down your throat and physically embarrass you, they would play like that. Where Andy, like, if he could choose, he would be the opposite. He'd rather score 50, throw it 50 times, throw like 10 all go specials. McVay's that, which is kind of weird because McVay came up with Gruden and the Shanahans, which actually are much more old school running the ball. I thought Gruden, maybe just because I'd forgotten he had been out of coaching for a while on TV, it's like, oh, this guy's like a passing game guy. And then you watch him. Gruden wants to run the ball. Gruden wants to play old school football. And I just think that you are who you are. So your personnel really dictates. Obviously, Sean can adapt when needed, but like we all have things we lean on in whatever we do, and he leans on the best. That's why he loves Stafford. Question for the pod. You were talking about all the college quarterbacks other than Manning. I was talking about the SEC guys. I wasn't talking about them all, but the SEC guys. What about Raiola at Nebraska? He has only started 1 year, but he flashed some great stuff. My buddy's a diehard Nebraska fan, so I watched him quite a bit. I really think he and Matt Rule are going to put together a great season. Wanted to hear your opinion. Well, like anybody, I was excited to watch him play. There are certain players in college, or, I don't follow, like some of you guys, if you're a big college football fan, you're probably a little more dialed in on college recruiting. And certain guys like Arch Manning, you knew that name when the kid was 15 years old. But for the most part, there are a lot of recruits you're like, never heard of this guy, right? And Riola's a guy that I'd heard of at like 16 years old. Started in Arizona, transferred to Georgia. He was going to go to Georgia, and then he goes to Ohio State. Then it's Nebraska. Obviously, Nebraska paid him millions of dollars, and I was excited to watch him play. Pretty underwhelmed. In fairness to Dylan Raiola, his dad, Dominic Raiola, the center for the Lions, football's hard. And being a true freshman, playing quarterback in the Big Ten, a conference that is really good on defense, I thought he was not good last year and kind of self-destructed at times. There was just like a instinctive aspect to his game. Now, you bring in Dana Holgorsen, who might not be the greatest head coach, dynamic offensive mind. I just think it's going to be fascinating. One thing that I'm just very interested in moving forward with college, I mentioned this with Colin. When you give a guy like Raiola, whatever he's making, several $1,000,000 a year. Now, he grew up rich anyway, but regardless, you're giving him millions of dollars, right? I'll give you an example. Derek Carr. When Derek Carr got to Fresno State, while his brother wasn't like, obviously, his brother's money wasn't his, he did show up driving a Hummer, right? So like the brother, their family's so close, it's basically all under the same umbrella. But Derek shows up driving a Hummer. A lot of other guys driving hoopties and shit at Fresno State. But Derek gets the same scholarship and the same lifestyle as everyone else on campus. Has college roommates when he gets to Fresno State like anyone else. No different than Matt Leinart would have or Cam Newton or whoever, right? Forever in college football. Now, when I pay a guy like Raiola all this money, I talk to people, they say a lot of these quarterbacks live in a huge house kind of by themselves. They're not necessarily living with their teammates, so you're kind of out of touch. There has to be a little resentment. If I'm like a third-year guy, let's say I'm like a guard or a defensive tackle, and I'm a guy in Nebraska, I'm one of the best players, I'm making some NIL, but I'm going to be one day probably like a second, third, fourth round pick. I'm an NFL player one day. I'm one of our best players, just a high-level guy. Wouldn't I resent that a little bit? I have no problem if you come in, you're making a lot of money, and you're good. But, like, I'm busting my ass, and I'm watching you making all this money, and you suck. I just think that these things get weird. I think there's a lot of pressure on Raiola being good. If he's not, like, you could argue that program could kind of crumble. They went all in on the guy. I mean, they treated him like he's like Luka or something. It's like, well, that's fine as long as he's a good player. listen, we can debate Quinn Ewers all we want. You have put Quinn Ewers on a good team. He's good enough to win you a bunch of games. Carson Beck, same thing. Again, we can nitpick these guys all we want. Like I've seen Carson Beck on a really good team win a lot of games. I watched Raiola fucking melt like put an ice cube in an Arizona summer day. And I don't know. There's no disputing his physical characteristics, but one thing we've seen now, time and time again, college football, definitely the NFL, is like just having a huge arm or being able to run. Like you got to be able to play quarterback, and maybe the hype, maybe the offense. I don't know, but I was down on the experience. Now, like I said, new Dana came in at the end and took over, but you get an off season with him. Excited to watch just the whole thing kind of come together or not. I mean, it's going to be Rule, Raiola are going to be a big college football story this year. I have a question regarding Lamar, Jalen, and Josh, and all the quarterbacks that run. Why is it when a quarterback throws for 3,500 yards and rushes for 500, we treat the guy like a scrub, but the 4,000-yard passers, some barely have over 200 yards on the ground? Why is it why is it that after the likes of Cam Newton, Michael Vick, isn't it discussed total yards to make it fair for everyone who isn't just passing? Also, please explain the Josh over Lamar MVP. Lamar had the first team All Pro, but lost the MVP to the second team All Pro. Josh Allen, one more win that important if Lamar had almost 700 more yards. Yeah, I mean, I just think people were going to be hard pressed with a guy who had crumbled before like a cookie in the playoffs, giving his third MVP. I think that played a huge factor. They're just like, we're going to make this guy a third MVP. And we've watched him in the playoffs crumble like a cookie. Now, last year was his best showing in the playoffs, that second half against the Bills. But I think people, and I would have had a hard time. Like, Google some of the three-time MVPs, right? The Bradys, the Mannings, the Favres. Like, it would have been, not saying that he doesn't deserve another MVP sometime in his career. And I understand it's a regular season award, but let's face it, there are a lot of different variables there. Listen, you could argue a lot of different things. Like, why do I get if I throw 10 interceptions on the season, if four of them bounce off my wide receiver's hands, how is that my fault? Now, I think you could counter, well, it's like, what about the five that were dropped by DBs, right? Now, in this one, it's very black and white. It's like, well, I threw for 3,800 yards and I ran for another 700. Yet some guy throws for 4,500 and doesn't run at all. It's the Jalen thing. Because I'd be like, well, Jalen only threw 18 touchdowns, right? It's like, well, yeah, he runs for 14. So it's like he accounted for well over 30. These are questions that are just never going to get answered. How does guaranteed money, signing bonuses, incentives per year affect the salary cap? Does the cap limit include incentives and bonuses? Do teams often have leftover or unspent money on the cap at the end of the year due to unfulfilled player incentives? How does that all work? The bonus stuff, I think, carries over to the next year. Because obviously, if you have $1 million worth of cap space and have to pay out $10 million worth of bonuses, it'd be impossible, and it's a hard cap. So it carries over to the following year. Guaranteed money, obviously, by definition, is the money you have to pay a guy. But you can manipulate the salary cap by putting, if I give you, let's use Trey Smith. I give Trey Smith $70 million guaranteed. Well, if I give him a 4-year contract, right, and that's either an extension, so it's actually I have him under contract for 5 years, or in his situation, he was on a franchise tag, so it's just the next 4 years. I can give him all of that money up front. I give him a signing bonus of $70 million, and then I can distribute that over the life of the contract however I want. Right? It's why you see a lot of guys sign contract extensions and their salary cap number goes down. Because if I give you a 30, a 50, a whatever $1 million bonus, I can then manipulate it and amortize it for you accounting majors over the salary cap. But it's why, in these other contracts, specifically basketball, when I give a guy $200 million over 5 years, it's $40 million every year, or maybe 38, 39, 40, 41, 42. Right? However it is. Football is never like that. It's why you have to treat the salary cap like a puzzle and use the guaranteed money to your advantage. Now, the more and more you want to give out in upfront signing bonuses, the more and more cap you can create. So the more an owner is willing to pay cash on individual years, the more they can load up their team, right? Not guaranteed to work. No one spent more actual cash in bonuses than Jimmy Haslam over the last 4 years. But I think like second and third were like the Eagles and the 49ers, who have won a lot. They have spent a lot of money over the last several years up front, giving out bonuses and manipulating the salary cap. And there are a lot of teams that are somewhere in the middle. They're like, yeah, we'll kind of do it and kind of not do it. I would say this, like, I think it's easy to go, well, why wouldn't you you have so much money? I think some people try it and then it backfires. And you're like, what am I doing this for? And football, more than basketball or baseball, like if I do sign Aaron Judge or Paul Skeens or whoever in baseball, unless they get injured, I know they're going to be good, right? And in basketball, if I get Jokic or whoever, it's guaranteed. In football, it's like some guys fall off a cliff, some guys get an injury or never the same. There just feels like there are a lot more variables because of the physicality of the sport and the coaching scheme turnover. They're more variables than any other sport, and I think teams get hesitant to try to manipulate it with money because it backfires sometimes and it feels like you wasted it. And once you get burned, right? If you're like, God, I spent, let's just say I'm an owner and I'm like, typically I would have given X in bonuses, and this year I gave $75 million more because we got aggressive. And then all of a sudden we win 6 games. I'm like, what a waste of fucking money. And then my franchise getting shit on that whole time too. As the season approaches, what defines a great NFL season? Is the league better served by dominant teams and many mediocre ones, or by upsets and parity with traditional powerhouses struggling? I'm a lifelong football fan, hoping to see the likes of the Lions, Bills, and Bears succeed. As just a sports fan, I think it's very, very well defined in most lanes what works, right? Even if we want to go to individual sports. I talk about, I'm not even a UFC guy. When are they at their best? When they have an absolute rock star superstar. Boxing, same thing. Give me Mike Tyson over 10 good boxers. Basketball, one, not even debatable. The best teams in the biggest markets are when the league is thriving the most. Same thing with baseball. World Series smoked the NBA Finals, not by accident. It was the Yankees versus the Dodgers. Football is the one sport that it truly doesn't matter. I mean, it really doesn't. Whether it's Lions versus the Chiefs or, the Giants versus the Steelers. Pittsburgh is a smaller market. The Cowboys versus the Jets. There's no, obviously that would never happen. But my point is, the markets truly don't matter in football. And because of the nature of the sport, I think this number has changed a little bit. But at one point in time, it was like 80-85% of games are one score going into the fourth quarter. A lot of football games in the NFL, college is different, are just by nature close. So I don't think there is, to get a good season, you need close, exciting games. But I don't think we're in this sport as determined by colleges, right? College, like Indiana, that's not going to work on a yearly basis, right? You need the Ohio States, you need the Michigans, you need the Georgias, the LSUs, the Floridas, the Ohio States. I already said that twice, but that's how. I mean, Ohio State's the biggest brand in the Texas, SC, Oregon. Like, it's important, In the NFL, if like the Chiefs, let's just say they had a season from hell and went 6-11, like the Niners. They just lost all these close games. It was the opposite of last year. Blew them all, had some injuries. It was a disaster. Which big picture it actually wouldn't be because they get a high pick and they kind of get to reset. But let's just use that example. And the Chiefs, which are the biggest brand in the league, they would get flexed out of some of their games and they would just pivot to whoever's playing well. Okay, the Broncos are in first place. Their games would get flexed into the better games. right? Or the Patriots now are an 11-win team. Their teams, they would get flexed into the games. You would ride the Bills. You just pivot where the Thunder had a remarkable season. They won like 67 games. They won the NBA championship, and they just don't move the needle. I mean, they were historically low rated in the same with the Pacers, even though the Pacers have much more history like when I was a kid. But my point is that the football, it doesn't necessarily matter as long as the games are good. Question for the bag. Longtime Bucks fan and really excited. What would you say are some of your favorite? I get asked this all the time. Your favorite jerseys, maybe a top three. I said this the other day on the mailbag. I'm not a like I don't I it's just one element of the sport of the conversation around the sport that I just pay no attention to. I'm not a jersey guy. I don't own jerseys. Obviously, there are some jerseys that are easy to make fun of, like some of the Color Rush on Amazon Prime Thursday Night Football. Like, I'd rather just have you play the traditional jersey, but I've never been like the Raiders and the Steelers are so much. Obviously, the Jags can feel a little, franchises like that, but I'm more of a traditional guy. Like, I just like stuff that I grew up on in terms of the jersey. It's why I have a lot of respect for Penn State, Alabama, USC. I just, and I got no problem with Oregon, but jerseys are just not something I spend any time thinking about. Truly. How would the Niners or Commanders operate at all without Jennings or McLaurin next season? Don't they have to pay these guys? They don't have a choice. Well, Terry McLaurin accounted for 13 touchdowns. 13 touchdowns. So if he disappears, where are you making that up from? I'm not saying he's going to disappear, but that's pretty important. Juwan Jennings accounted for 77 catches in a season where they lost Ayuk. They had a lot of wide receiver issues. And their offense was actually pretty good. They just were bad in the red zone. But he was extremely productive for them. Yeah, I mean, both guys have leverage. The 49ers, people think they're going to suck. I just look at their schedule. I think it would be, I mean, they're the betting favorite for a reason, but he is their top wide receiver, at least going in early in the season until Ricky Pearsall. Now, I would say the difference, Terry McLaurin's a true one, right? Or true one. I mean, obviously he's not as good as some of the true ones, but he's a guy that if your team's good, you can rely on him to ride him, right? And obviously the quarterback and him have an excellent rapport, and he's their top option. Even trading for Debo, he's a better player than Debo. The 49ers, you would say, is like, well, George Kittle's better than Juwan Jennings, and if McCaffrey's healthy, he is as well. So I guess it'd be easier for the 49ers to get by for a minute, but I think both guys would be a problem. Okay, we'll end on this. College football head coaching USGA GIN rankings. This means the handicap for the different college coaches. The best handicap, Trey Lamb, is a +1.3 at Tulsa. Dilfer is a 0.7. Now, in fairness, Dilfer was a scratch before he got into coaching. Most of these guys are coaches. I would say in a perfect world, if you told me, what would you like your college football coach, if you're at a Power 5 program, his handicap to be? You would like him to be decent because recruiting boosters is important. Recruiting people, money around the program is important. So he's got to be able to play golf. To me, somewhere between like a 10 and 15. I would say if you're a single digit, might be playing a little too much. Of all the guys at the top program, like Hugh Freeze, 7, Lincoln Riley, 9. Like you could even go with 7 to 15. Kirby Smart is a 12. Belichick is a 12. Ryan Day is a 12. I would say 10 to 12 is my sweet spot. Like, my coach has a little personality, can socialize, get out, takes it seriously, likes to compete, but also isn't spending so much time on the driving range that he's trying to become a 4. Now, a lot of these guys, they play probably a lot in the summer and the off season, and they don't play at all in the fall. But so of all the guys running big programs, Hugh Freeze has the best. Shane Beamer's a 9, PJ Fleck's an 11, Dan Mullen, he's at UNLV as a 12, but he's been in the media for a little while. I would pay to watch Belichick versus Ryan Day or Belichick versus Kirby in just a match play scenario. I think that would, if we put that thing on YouTube, it'd probably do pretty well. Brian Kelly's a 14. Whittingham's a 14. Good golf in Utah. I enjoyed that graphic. So have a good weekend. Talk to everyone later. See you.